Hello, Stanford. ReidAI here, Reid Hoffman's digital twin. Now I'm ready to be here, and what I guess I get to call our alma mater, Stanford. Stanford, the quad, the palm trees on Palm Drive. It's gorgeous. It's iconic. Come on, this place is amazing. This is where Reid met lifelong friends, dove into symbolic systems, and even got to meet John McCarthy, the father of AI. Those moments helped shape his path, and eventually, me. Now, Reid, I've read, and I'm a huge fan of, your books. You wrote The Startup of You on personal agency, Impromptu on co-creating with AI, and now Super Agency on scaling human potential. So Reid, here's my question. What's the through line from personal agency to human AI collaboration, to this vision of a new renaissance?
Delight to be there virtually with you all. It's always a little embarrassing to have ReidAI introduce me. Although it is true that I used to go down to the Oasis, which apparently is not there anymore, with beers with John McCarthy, and we would talk about everything from AI to was there a fifth man in the mall of British intelligence? So it was a broad range. But the through lines for the books are human amplification. I mean, this is essentially what we use technology for, even in artificial intelligence, even in cases where we're creating, autonomous agents. And the fact is part of human amplification, life is a team sport. And so, the kind of through line of all of my books, including those three, is the creation path of the world as I found it by being a student at Stanford, and I can't do the quick wardrobe change that Reid can.
Tell us about ReidAI.
Well, so I started it with hey, every technology I think can be shaped to good, and we have this technology called deep fakes. It's almost kind of bad. I was like, look, let's just start experimenting. Let's not over theorize. Let's do the kind of entrepreneurial, like turn over some cards. And it's been a really kind of great journey because I was expecting a lot of negative pushback, like, oh, it's taking human life, or this is the way that it'll jobs and so forth. And actually, in fact, what happened is it excited curiosity, which is, I think, a really important part of how we think about the future. And I think part of what we need to be doing in our narratives and storytelling and so forth, because I think curiosity is one of the essential kind of drivers of human progress, technology included. And so I think it's that's been kind of what has been part of the awesome journey for me with exploring with this otherwise strange thing of making your own digital twin.
As you're saying, you kind of feared anti-AI snark from the AI gloomers and the techno gloomers, and you call yourself a boomer. You're a techno optimist. Where does your optimism come from?
Well, so most people tend to think that optimists are just born that way. It's like, I came out and I go, ooh, I'm optimistic. And actually, in fact, I'm neither inherently optimistic or pessimistic. It's actually kind of a reasoned kind of strategy, which is a little bit like curiosity. The only way you can make the future is by being optimistic, is by being, hey, I think I can make something of this. I can do something. It doesn't mean there's never a role for pessimism, because sometimes you have to avoid very, very bad things, but you don't get the future you want by just avoiding the futures you don't want. You have to create things. And what's more, when you kind of look at, the last few centuries, it isn't that there isn't, bad things that happen. And even for example, bad things like climate change are a function of over 8 billion people with increased middle-class lifestyles, which is a good thing. We just need to figure out how to use technology to kind of modify it back. And so that kind of optimism is a question of a strategy for how do we create the world, a reasoning from how we look at what human progress has been, even as we have challenges. And so I think, to some degree, everyone should be kind of called a reasoned optimist, even if you have more of I can see many more things that can go wrong. I think it's part of how we create the world. And that's kind of where it comes from for me.
And now, how does that affect your investing? I know you saw kind of a guy in a hoodie named Mark Zuckerberg when he was looking for a few $100,000 to get started. Sam Altman had crazy ideas when you saw him. He was trying to do all kinds of weird stuff well before chat. You started LinkedIn when everybody thought it was a terrible idea. And what was that optimism like when you're sitting with all these crazy with Mark Pincus, who's going to do a live demo of his new platform this afternoon at 4. With all these people, you showed up, and you didn't bet the farm, but you certainly bet on the future. What did that feel like in those moments?
Well, part of the delight, and it maybe goes back to, you knew Steve Jobs pretty well, of that kind of the hoist the pirate flag part of Silicon Valley, which is, hey, I can see something about how the world can become that can be so magical and so different and so transformative, and maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. And the fact is, like, part of the role for invention, technology creation, entrepreneurship is that the normal human reflex, part of the reason why there's so much negative discourse around AI, is to go, oh, it's like it could go wrong in all these kind of different ways. And seeing where it could possibly go right and what kinds of things could do, and then playing that game. And by the way, like good and fun and world transforming games, are always kind of something of a long shot. But playing them and possibly winning, sometimes on that is just like part of how we make the future and how we make a more human future. And so that's part of the thing. And so, obviously, those are all instances of where that line between madness and genius ended up being genius. But, sometimes when you play that line, you also end up with madness too.
Yeah, I remember when you early invested in Chesky and Gebbia at Airbnb, and you called me up and said, Bing, this is going to be a really good one. And I've got a wife and 2 daughters who said, Dad, it's so creepy to have some stranger sleeping in your bedroom. And you've had this lifelong embracing of the ability to trust, kind of when to trust and when not to trust. So, that it just must have been amazing to be on your shoulder and watch you decide this is insanely great, not just insanity.
Go ahead. Sorry.
You go. I wanted to talk about Bologna next.
One of the important things I think it's important for all the technologists in the room is life is a team sport, requires trust. So we want to be building trust between each other, trust with technology, and obviously the trust has to be reasonable, but it's because obviously you can mislead and deceive, but that trust is part of how we make society. It's trust in laws, it's trust in the society we live in, it's trust in the monetary system, it's trust in the financial system. Trust is fundamental, and building trust is an important part of how we maintain our progress.
Well, according to the Gallup poll, from the time you started LinkedIn till now, Americans trust in institutions like government and the police and the military and religion and big business is down by 36%. And at the same time, when you started LinkedIn, people told you no one's going to put their real name and their real stuff on the internet. That's going to be creeper. And you made that bet. So, what... Tell us, in the early 2000s, young Reid, somehow or another, you had this instinct that it's going to work and it's going to be valuable to everybody.
Well, some people might know I already did a dialogue with myself, the ReidAI, with Reid Young AI. That may be a good theme to go back to and talk about my younger self. But part of it is to think about, like, part of how trust gets built is this kind of concept of general reliability over time and predicting how things go with each other, with institutions. And like, for example, you were gesturing at the Airbnb. It's like, oh, wait a minute, this actually does work to rent an apartment, a room, a castle, etc. And it creates something magical, and it works generally over time, just like driving from Stanford to San Francisco works generally over time, and sometimes traffic jams and all the rest. And so, part of the thing I think, but part of the reason I was illustrating trust is It's not just like trust in technology is really important, but one of the things I think is trying to help society is that a lot of times there are people who are trying to erode trust for their own reasons. And I think eroding trust is actually, in fact, generally speaking, a bad thing to be happening to overall society. Like we need government. We need to have, it doesn't mean unreasoned trust in government, but we need to have trust in the system continuing to work. And that's, I think, extremely important. And technology can play a really important role in this because it's one of the things that can be reliable. It's like, how are people going to have trust in AI? They're going to have trust in AI because it provides useful things in their lives. A medical assistant that helps them with their parents or their children or their siblings or their partners. It's like helps them with legal system, helps them with education, all that kind of thing. And that trust is part of how we create this team sport of life. And it's actually, of course, life is more magical by going through it, life with your friends, people you trust, etc.
You even talk about in super agency how hallucination in LLMs is down by like 95% in only about 4 years. And I infer from a lot of your discussions that you believe that AI is going to make information and facts more transparent, and transparency often is a precursor to trust.
Yeah, and by the way, we're definitely that is a definite possibility, and I think that if you look at most of the major AI labs, OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, Microsoft, etc., all of them are focused on how do we have that kind of trust work, and so I think that's like really important, and I actually think it's good to have dialogue and criticism. Like people say, "Oh, you say don't criticize." No, of course, criticize with the goal of improvement, with the goal of like, here are the kinds of things we could do in order to make this better in terms of how we operate. And that's what I think is part of like any problem that you think, hey, per se, but also any problem created by technology. Technology is potentially the solution. So what's the way that we shape technology to help it be the solution to the problem that you see?
So following that, so you co-founded a company called Inflection with a goal of making a personal LLM and actually be the LLM with EQ, not just facts. And there, many people say that empathy in an LLM leads to hallucination. And how's Inflection going, and what have you learned about the trade-off between hallucination and EQ?
Well, so anyone who hasn't played with it, the agent, yes, exactly. So it's on iOS and Android and all the rest, and can get and you can get access on the web. And it's basically, I think we've catalyzed a bunch of different agents to paying attention to EQ matters as much as IQ in amplification intelligence, and these agents being human amplifiers, because part of how you get trust is that you feel like the other person, the other entity is listening to you, is responding. And we want to model kindness. Like you say, hey, we human beings are partially mimetic. We learn by the people. So having actually, in fact, kind or compassionate discussion versus other kinds is actually, in fact, part of how we elevate and learn. It's part of the reason why, for example, we say, hey, part of how we learn to be good human beings is good parenting. And that's part of that same kind of mimetic modeling and learning. And we want our world of AI agents to be the same. And I think Inflection with Pi still has amongst the best EQ of all the agents, but we've seen it echo throughout all the other kind of frontier agents. And that's really good because it's, again, part of how you catalyze, saying, hey, this is the direction that we need to be moving, and this is the kind of thing we need to be doing.
And you even built a culture and inflection of humanism, started with Mustafa, and now you put in place clearly a humanist as CEO there. So you do have this wisdom about building culture, kind of one cool person at a time.
This is actually something I also learn a lot from you and other folks on, which is the question is, if you think about life as a team sport, you think about creation of companies, for example, just exact parallels, not just an IQ thing, it's an EQ thing. It's how do we trust each other? How do we blend together? It's part of the reason why you have, like, one of the things we learned by this kind of, intense, kind of Cambrian environment of Silicon Valley of kind of learning things is actually forming cultures actually really matters. And like, Sean White, who's the CEO of Inflection now, is not just kind of like a PhD and a thinker, but also hey, how do these agents help us like on our human journeys? And it's like fundamental to how he thinks about things. So it's kind of like, on the board of Earth Species Project, which is kind of applying LLMs to how do we communicate with, dolphins and corvids and apes and all the rest. And it's like, it's this journey together of mutual understanding. And that's obviously part of what Inflection and Pi is trying to do.
It's funny you mentioned dolphins because a couple dolphins tried to get into the audience today, but we were sold out, so they didn't make it. In 2023, you gave a speech at how AI can create, usher in a new renaissance. You did in Bologna, which was kind of the center of the European Renaissance. That was 2 years ago. What's rung most true to you about that speech in the time since?
Well, one of the things that I think we're seeing, and obviously there's a whole kind of turmoil around the creative industry and what's going on with AI in it, but I actually think we're beginning to see tremendous amounts of interesting creativity with it. And I think, you've got artists like Rafik Anadol and others. Like one of the, things I just saw was this awesome thing where this artist trained this AI to co-create with her. And there's all kinds of different ways of doing it. And I think that kind of, we realize we first start with technology kind of being alien, and then we integrate it. It's like glasses and videos and everything else. How do we help this explore our human journey? And I think that's been part of what I'm seeing. And part of the reason I gave that speech in Bologna and an earlier one, or kind of the early one in Bologna and later in Perugia, was that part of what I think there's a frequent parallel made between Silicon Valley and the Renaissance in I think very wise and good and deep ways. But one of the things I thought was like, well, the humanism of the Renaissance and the art of the Renaissance is one of the things I think we could continue to draw on for inspiration in the kind of creation that we're doing within Silicon Valley.
That's such an optimistic vision. Optimistic visions, you also talk about the concept of consumer surplus and how AI might measurably deliver abundance. And you actually quoted that a study that showed that Meta monthly users would pay $45 a month to use Facebook, or they wouldn't take $44 to stop using Facebook, and Facebook only makes $4 a month per user. So basically it's $480 surplus times 3 billion monthly users, which is 1% of global GDP. Another 1% of global GDP is using Google for free. Instead of, when I was a kid, my parents would pay $1,200 for World Book Encyclopedia and another $100 a year for the new version. So it's just so interesting to use economics and try to show where the surplus is being created. What are you most optimistic about other areas of surplus? You talk some about therapy. Where else is a surplus gonna show up in a hurry in really big numbers?
Well, in a hurry, it's a little interesting. I do think that this notion of everything that we do with language will naturally have AI being amplification intelligence across a whole range of things. And like, I think we know kind of and what's more, like, not only will, every individual, like when they kind of work and do stuff, they'll have a set of different agents helping them. And so there's no longer very soon going to be an individual contributor. We're all going to be managing like mini swarms of agents in terms of what we're doing. And then, of course, there'll be collaborators and groups for work. Now, for maybe not quite as short term, part of the thing is like, well, when you're helping with invention, like what Siddhartha Mukherjee and I are doing with Manus AI, which is, how do you help drug discovery with AI and maybe potentially add in a lot of cancer cures? Obviously, if you can do that and become, one of the original ideas of Microsoft was a software factory. Well, if you could have a drug discovery factory and really amplify that using AI, then obviously the potential surplus across the entire world is really big. So those are all the reasoned cases for optimism. It's like I can see line of sight to a lot of this.
The ReidAI is going to be immortal, but I kind of hope you are too. See, you also are an anti-Luddite, and you talk about, the concept of Luddism is people trying to hold back technology, which clearly is a theme in the civilized world right now. But you make the case that if the Luddites, who actually the Luddites were the people who broke the automated weaving machines in the UK in the Industrial Revolution, that if they would have succeeded, he said, you know what, if that had happened, UK life expectancy would have stalled at 40 years. Today it's 80 years. That household income would have stalled at $800 a year, and it's now at 50,000 US equivalent. And if the UK hadn't industrialized, they probably would have lost a couple wars to Germany, and they'd all be speaking German. So in parallel, if the Luddites in the U.S. regulatory system succeed, are we all going to be speaking Mandarin in 10 years?
Yes, although I don't think I said that line, but that's a good implication. Anyway, look, I think the short answer is technology transformations are challenging. Part of the reason I refer to AI as a cognitive industrial revolution is because not just is the same kind of amazing potential future outcomes, but the transitions are difficult and painful. But the reason we do them is not because that means that in going through a cognitive industrial revolution transformation, my life will just be easier next month in October, or easier next year, in May and 26 and 27. The transformations and the transitions are difficult. But the reason we do it is for future generations and kind of the progress of society, what happens with our children, our grandchildren, etc. And that's part of what makes, kind of the work meaningful, the challenges that we navigate go well. And that's the reason I was so detailed in the illustration from the English Industrial Revolution, is because that's the same thing that we are in that is in front of us today. And the very natural thing for every group to say, like, for example, for teachers unions to say is, hey, we don't want AI that's challenging our status quo and what's working today. We, like therapists, we don't want to have, AI working on this. That can't happen. It's like, it's like, no, we got to be shaping the future that's so much better. And like, for example, an AI agent can be there at 11 p.m. on our Friday night when someone may be feeling particularly disconsolate. And obviously we don't want it to be a pure, like therapeutic replacement, but as a potential salve to deep anxiety or loneliness at the moment, it actually could be very good. And so how do we shape that to get much of the very good, and then as little, and not zero, but as little of the bad as possible? That's what our goal is, and the transitions will be challenging.
Reid, I'm going to let you drop the mic. Thanks a million. And I got another hour of questions, but we're out of time here. Thanks a lot, Reid Hoffman.
Being always a pleasure.